Hi everyone, I am Ann Urok and I'm here to talk to you about our final module, which is our case study. So our first slide here is summarizing the case that was given to us. So in a 900 student school, a first year principal, Richard Inman, worked hard and cultivated a relationship with a troubled student named James. Principal Richard's effort to build the relationship helped James improve his grades, social interaction skills, and not fighting. But then James finally got called to the principal after multiple tardies. After leaving the office, James was caught giving something to another student that a teacher thought was drugs. The other student was David, an honor student involved in band and was very nervous about the situation. Both students were immediately escorted to the office. David was searched and found brass knuckles plus a prohibited weapon on him. David started to cry and James took credit for all of it being his. Principal Richard was mixed with emotions of pride, sadness, and guilt about the students. Both students were immediately escorted to jail and charged with a felony possession of a weapon. Both students should be expelled for 45 days plus disciplinary alternative education program. Both were taken to the youth detention facility. Principal Richard filed the correct paperwork for James but did not fill out David's. A week later, David was back in class while James was at the district DAEP. Principal Richard was contacted by the Director of Secondary Education explaining that he would be officially reprimanded for his behavior if he did not fill out the paperwork for David. Our next slide on here is reporting any legal or ethical issues. The first bullet I put on here is David currently has no consequences for the actions that came about due to the exchange with James. The second bullet on here is currently only James is expelled for 45 days in the district DAEP. And then the final bullet I have on here is the principal not turning in the corresponding paperwork for David, the honors student, could get reprimanded for the behavior. Our next slide here is to synthesize the information. A first year principal brought two students, one rebel student and the other an honor student, to his office to reprimand and communicate with the students about their illicit behavior in the school. And the principal expelled the rebel student, but not the other. Now we're going to synthesize the facts. So the first category we have on here is people. So Richard Inman is a first year principal at Rocket Junior High, which consists of 900 students. Richard went out of his way to cultivate a relationship with a troubled student, James. James is 15, heavily tattooed, and muscular. James exchanged prohibited items with honor student David Ramos. David participates in honors classes and the band. The school officer brought both students to the office and took them to the youth detention facility. Parents of both students were contacted. After paperwork was filed for only one of the two students, Richard was contacted by the Director of Secondary Education that he could possibly be reprimanded for his contact. Our second category on here for the facts is the place. So the whole event took place at the Rocket Junior High School. The school is located on the south side. And our final category for our facts is program. So the Rocket Junior High School is a public school. Junior high schools are typically 6th through 8th grade levels. And this current district has a disciplinary alternative education program known as a DAEP for their expelled students that usually lasts about 45 days. Our next slide here is to review and prioritize our information. So the first bullet I got on here is the situation could be damaging to the stakeholders of the school if the best legal and ethical decision is not made. The damage could be to the reputation of the school and the admin. The community could also be looked down upon if outsiders see that the school is not acting in a legal and ethical way. Our next bullet on here is Principal Richard has the most important stake in the outcome and decision made from the situation. He will make the final decision if David will get expelled or not. Our next bullet is one possible stakeholder that the principal can communicate with is the school's superintendent about the situation. The superintendent can help guide the principal towards a good decision that is both legal and ethical. Our next bullet is, yes, I think there could possibly be more information to learn about the situation that happened. There might be some underlying background information missing. For instance, was David asking to borrow the prohibited weapons because he was possibly being bullied or scared for his life due to him being an honors student? And the last bullet I have on here is, I think there's enough information to make a decision, but some questioning that could be done only if David was the one asking for the prohibited weapons or not, and this can help cultivate more of an ethical decision in the end. Our next slide that I have here is identifying the possible options and consequences that could occur from them. So option 1 I have is abide by the Director of Secondary Education and complete the same paperwork for David as was done for James for being expelled due to the possession of prohibited weapons. I have for option 2, it could possibly be just take the reprimand from the Director of Secondary Education and not fill out the paperwork for expelling David because he is a student in good standing. And the third option that I have, the final option, is complete the paperwork for David, then do some investigating on David. Talk to David about if he was wanting the weapons as a way to protect himself, if he was getting bullied at school due to his intelligence and honors classes, and then find solutions for David if he was being bullied in the end. And then some possible consequences that could occur from these options is, one possible consequence could be, as a principal, getting reprimanded could lead to getting fired by your district, which could make it harder to get another job in the future. Another possible consequence would be feeling unethically sound about completing and not completing the paperwork on David, and either could have a consequence for David also. So the next slide here is we have evaluate the options I stated on the last slide. So I divided these into the pros and cons and the according options underneath each one. So I'm going to start with the pros. So option 1, some pros are it advocates for being completely legal. It also is abiding by the Director of the Secondary Education. And then the third pro to this one would be there's no reprimanding in the end. Option 2, some pros would be you're advocating for the student in good standing, and you might feel more ethically correct in the end for choosing this option. Option 3, this models both ethical behaviors and legal decisions. It helps David if there is some underlying problem going on with him. And then it builds more of a relationship with David when you've been previously building a relationship with James as well. And then going over to the cons. So option 1, some cons would be David's side of the situation is not communicated. Option 2, some cons would be it's not completely legal. You could get reprimanded and possibly fired due to the reprimand. And then option 3 is David will still have to be expelled in the end. So the next slide here is choosing the best option. So in my opinion, I would choose option 3 for this situation. So the first bullet I have is this option would still have the principal fill out the paperwork on David for being expelled, but it would give the principal a way to find out the reasoning behind why the prohibited weapons were being exchanged in the first place. The next bullet would be it would allow the principal to find a balance between ethical and legal in their decision. This would model some ethical behavior of the principal by finding a happy medium between ethical and legal decisions. The next bullet says, even though David would still be expelled, it would give the principal a chance to communicate to David about if he was the one wanting the weapons. This would cultivate the conversation about if David was getting bullied based on his academic performance. The next bullet is, if that is the case, the principal can find a solution for David getting bullied so that this situation does not happen again. And then lastly, this could help the well-being of David in the end instead of him suffering from being bullied. So next we're implementing my decision. So this would be choosing your path. Step 1 would be communicate with the district superintendent about my choice or your decision. Step 2 would be complete the according paperwork on David for possession of a prohibited weapon on school property and for being expelled. Step 3 would be arrange a meeting with David at the DAEP. 4, communicate with David about why the weapons were being exchanged. Was he possibly being bullied? Are they an act of defense, or is there another underlying problem maybe at home? Step 5 is, if any of these were true, find a way to solve the bullying problem or try to help the situation at home for David. Step 6, after the 45 days are served by both students, A, continue cultivating the relationship with James like you were before, and B, do checkups on David 2 to 3 times a week on how he is doing mentally and if bullying was the problem to see if it was stopped. And then continuing on with implementing your decision. So what may happen? Once David gets into the DAEP, it may be difficult to arrange to meet with him to discuss your hunch about him being bullied and needing the weapons to defend himself. The superintendent may advise you not to look deeper into the situation and just fill out the paperwork and let the boys serve their 45 days. While advocating for David, since he is an honor student, he could be resilient to help if he is being bullied and doesn't want to own up to it. So next we have who needs to know. The superintendent needs to be aware of the entire plan and situation. If it turns out to be bullying situation for David, the counselor and David's mother would need to know what is going on. The DAEP will also need to be in the know of your plan to come talk to David about the background information of the situation. Next we have, can you deal with this on your own? This situation does involve giving consequences for breaking school policy by bringing in prohibited weapons, so there are laws and legal involved. By making the decision to complete the paperwork for the students that were involved can be done on my own, but will involve the police and then being taken to the youth detention facility. Warning, if the situation is not resolved the legal and ethical way, the principal could end up getting reprimanded and possibly being fired. Plus, if David is not communicated with on the reason behind the weapons, he could continue to get bullied and need items to protect himself. What you might do next if the chosen plan of action doesn't work. So option 2 would be difficult for the principal in the end if they were reprimanded for not turning in the paperwork for David. It could lead to getting fired, and it would be difficult to find a new job after that. The plan B, in my opinion, would be option 1. This option is purely dealing with the legal side of the situation only. So finally, here's my reflection. After completing this assignment, it gave me a real life scenario to work through as a future leader. It taught me how to think about all of the possible options and what their potential outcomes or consequences could be in any type of situation. This assignment also taught me the process of listing out every step for the best plan possible for the option chosen for the given situation, and make sure that to involve all the stakeholders in the process. This particular situation reiterated the importance of finding the balance between legal and ethical decision making. There needs to be this balance in ethical decisions with emotional and logical thinking that goes into finding the right choice. Currently, I am in a part of a rural school district, and the situation like this is not as likely to occur as it would be for a south side or big city school. I have encountered situations like this one throughout my time of teaching at Hope. The main situation that I think would happen at my school would be students bringing alcohol into the school. But if this situation would occur, it would be close to the same process at which I made for this assignment that could help in the future as a leader. In the end, throughout this entire class, it helped me learn how to process and plan as a future leader and putting it into actions in a real life situation. The class made me realize the importance of being an ethical leader and to be able to lead with a moral compass in the future. As a future leader, I can and plan to use the knowledge, skills, and processes learned in this class in my future school as a leader. Thank you everybody for listening, and Merry Christmas.